Hello hockey fans, and welcome back to another video. Like any other major sport, the National Hockey League has seen its fair share of controversial personalities over the years. One player that's recently been under the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons though, is New York Rangers defenceman Tony DeAngelo. Having bounced between 3 different teams in 3 years early in his pro career, the former first-round pick is coming off his best season yet, having scored 53 points in 68 games last season and earning himself a 2-year, $9.6 million contract for his efforts. However, thanks to his behaviour both on and off the ice, DeAngelo finds himself on New York's taxi squad while the team looks to trade him less than 3 months after signing his new deal. Given that he's coming off the most productive season of his entire pro career, and considering the Rangers only just signed him to a multi-million-dollar deal, it really does beg the question: why is DeAngelo no longer playing with the team? Why is there such a disconnect between the player and the organisation? Well, thanks to a physical altercation several weeks ago and a lengthy history of prior incidents, the defenceman might have just watched his promising NHL career disappear before his very eyes. This is the story of Tony DeAngelo, from career year to waivers. Before we begin, this video is brought to you by the Hockey Podcast Network and their partnership with DraftKings. Have you ever wanted to give yourself better odds on winning a bet? Well, ladies and gentlemen, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you the chance to do exactly that. Whether it's the NHL, the NBA, the UFC, or any other major sport, DraftKings is the world's leading sportsbook, complete with sign-up bonuses and weekly deals, and you can get in on the action by using the code THPN. For non-betting regions, DraftKings also offers new players a shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their daily fantasy app. I've personally been using DraftKings for several years now, and I love the showdown contests they host, where you pick a single game, you choose a player at each position, and you watch as your group rack up fantasy points for goals, shots, saves, and blocks. There's no better way to put your hockey knowledge to the test, and you can do so with DraftKings' safe, secure, reliable platform, which helps you deposit and withdraw your funds at your convenience. Download the DraftKings app now and use promo code THPN to get a shot at millions of dollars in total prizes every week. That's promo code THPN for your chance to win millions of dollars in total prizes. Minimum $5 deposit, eligibility restrictions apply. But anyway, back to the video. In order to tell this controversial tale, allow me to take you back to the beginning of the 13-14 season, when American defenceman Tony DeAngelo suited up in his 3rd year with the OHL Sarnia Sting. Having scored 58 points in 62 games during the prior 12-13 season, and with him entering his first year of eligibility for the upcoming NHL entry draft, DeAngelo was determined to kick his production up a notch and cement his place as one of the top players available at the event. In fact, the 18-year-old would go on to light the lamp more than he had ever done before, as he potted 71 points in 51 OHL games, while also securing a place at the CHL's 2014 Top Prospects game. However, DeAngelo's on-ice success wasn't without its problems off it too. On January 31st, 2014, it was revealed that Sarnia had removed DeAngelo from their roster and suspended him from the team, with the coaching staff claiming a pretty serious matter had occurred, which forced them to make an internal decision before notifying the league. Several weeks later, on February 14th, the OHL announced that DeAngelo had been suspended for 8 games due to violating the league's abuse and diversity policy. Though he had already been punished under the same policy once that year, this latest suspension came after DeAngelo had supposedly directed a most inappropriate statement towards a player on his own team. In fact, this suspension was the first time in the policy's 20 years that it had to be enforced for an incident involving 2 teammates. Oh, and if his 8-game suspension wasn't enough trouble for him, DeAngelo was also suspended for a 3rd time that year after receiving a 1-game ban for abuse of officials. The kid just didn't know when to stop, did he, folks? Despite being suspended for nearly an entire month of the season, losing several weeks of crucial development in his game and potentially damaging his draft stock, DeAngelo was still considered to be one of the top players available at the 2014 draft, as he was ranked 10th place on the North American skaters list. Though his attitude and behavioural issues had clearly thrown up some red flags, his on-ice play was deemed so impressive that a number of teams around the league were willing to look past his many transgressions and consider adding him to their organisation. This desire to pick up a high-potential, high-scoring blue liner culminated in Tony DeAngelo being chosen 19th overall by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Following his selection at the draft, DeAngelo would quickly join the Lightning organisation, and though he would sign his entry-level contract with the team on December 2nd, 2014, he would spend the following 14-15 season back in the OHL with Sarnia. After scoring an impressive 10 goals and 38 points in the first 29 games of the year, on January 8th, 2015, it was announced that DeAngelo had been traded to the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. Having left Sarnia after parts of 4 seasons with the team, the American defenceman would spend the rest of the year lighting the lamp for the Greyhounds, as he potted 15 goals and 51 points in just 26 games with his new team. This meant that DeAngelo finished the year having scored a grand total of 25 goals and 89 points in just 55 regular season games, good enough to earn him the Max Kaminsky Trophy for the OHL's Best Defenceman, as well as the CHL's Defenceman of the Year award too. However, DeAngelo's off-ice behaviour was still plagued with a number of issues. Though he wouldn't receive anything in the form of a suspension that year, according to an OHL staffer at the time, DeAngelo's attitude was described as a gong show as he was extremely difficult to handle. The staffer mentioned how it was a daily struggle trying to manage the teenage blue liner, with the perfect example being how he was the best guy to be around when Sarnia or the Greyhounds were winning, but when they weren't, he was a ticking time bomb. There were also some claims suggesting that DeAngelo's difficulty fitting into a locker room had stemmed from his youth hockey days in New Jersey, with one person stating, "There's plenty out there for anyone with a brain to figure out the kind of guy he is." That said, a lot of his behaviour was either justified or even excused as teenage angst, with a number of people hoping that once he finally grew up and matured a little, he would learn to rein it in before it was too late. Would that happen though? Well, the 15-16 season would see DeAngelo join the Lightning for their pre-season training camp, where he looked to impress the coaching staff and earn a spot on Tampa's opening night roster. Though the organisation would be pleased with his progress, the former first-round pick was unable to book his place on the team, as on September 27th, DeAngelo was cut from the Lightning roster and instead began the year with their AHL affiliate, the Syracuse Crunch. Though he would end up spending the entire year down in the minors, the American defenceman would kick off his pro career in style, as he scored 6 goals and 43 points in 69 AHL games, while also finishing 7th in the league in scoring amongst blue liners. That said, the 20-year-old's debut would once again be coupled with its fair share of off-ice issues, as DeAngelo would be left out of the lineup as a healthy scratch on 8 different occasions, a pretty sizable number for the 19th overall pick from just 2 years prior. Now, to be fair, DeAngelo had managed to rack up 84 penalty minutes and was a -18 too, so the decision to leave him out of the lineup might have simply stemmed from his discipline issues or lackluster defense. However, these discrepancies didn't stop the various rumours suggesting that DeAngelo's attitude might have been a leading factor in his frequent scratches, especially considering his recent track record in juniors. Given that the Lightning would move on from DeAngelo less than a year after he officially joined the organisation, it seemed as if the latter argument may have played a bigger role than anyone was willing to admit. On June 25th, 2016, it was announced that DeAngelo had been traded to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for a 2016 second-round pick. Not the best return for a mid-first rounder from just 2 years prior, is it, folks? That said, DeAngelo's numerous off-ice issues and his rapidly declining reputation meant that the Lightning were clearly negotiating from a position of weakness, to the point where it was difficult enough for them to find a team willing to simply take him off their hands, let alone receive an asset of equal or similar value in return. But I digress. Having been shipped off to the Coyotes less than a year after signing his rookie contract, DeAngelo hoped that his move to the Arizona desert would finally give him the opportunity to earn his place on an NHL roster. Though he would ultimately achieve this goal in the coming year, his long list of controversies was far from over. As the 16-17 season began, DeAngelo would once again find himself in the AHL after failing to earn a place on the Coyotes roster out of training camp. Though he would begin the year with Arizona's minor league affiliate, the Tucson Roadrunners, the former first-round pick wouldn't stay down there for long, as on November 8, 2016, the Coyotes called DeAngelo up to their roster, where he would finally suit up in his NHL debut. From there, DeAngelo would spend the rest of the year switching between the Coyotes and the Roadrunners, where he continued to put his offensive skills on display by potting 16 points in 25 AHL games, along with 14 points in 39 NHL games. Unfortunately though, the 21-year-old would be unable to keep himself out of trouble, as on January 1st, 2017, DeAngelo was suspended by the NHL for 3 games due to abuse of officials. This ban came about during a game against the Calgary Flames the day before, in which DeAngelo was given a game misconduct for the same infraction, but the league deemed his actions worthy of a much lengthier punishment. I hope you're keeping track, folks, because all these suspensions are starting to add up pretty quickly. Once his opening stint in the NHL had come to an end, and having continued to couple his strong offensive production with being routinely disciplined for his actions, the Coyotes became the second NHL team to quickly cut ties with the young blue liner. On June 23, 2017, it was announced that Arizona had traded DeAngelo to the New York Rangers, along with the 7th overall pick in the upcoming draft, in exchange for Derek Stepan and Antti Ranta. Having joined his 3rd NHL team in just 3 seasons, it was clear that DeAngelo's behaviour had quickly worn thin for several different organisations, to the point where it was easier for them to trade him and make him somebody else's problem instead. He may have shown the potential to develop into a high-scoring blue liner in the best league in the world, but his actions both on and off the ice simply weren't worth the hassle for a number of NHL teams, as he would fail to learn from his mistakes or change his ways year after year. Now, if you thought his move to Broadway would help put him on the straight and narrow, unfortunately you would be very, very mistaken. The 17-18 season would see DeAngelo join the Rangers organisation, and though he would spend his first year with the franchise bouncing between the bigs and the minors, the American defenceman would earn a more permanent place on the Rangers roster for the following 18-19 NHL season as the team continued through their rebuild, and DeAngelo impressed the coaching staff during his half-season stint on New York's roster. From there, the 23-year-old would suit up in his first full season in the league and cement his place on the team by potting 4 goals and 30 points in 61 games. What made this performance even better though was the fact that there had been no suspensions or other specific incidents in which DeAngelo had been reprimanded for his behaviour, leading some to wonder whether the defenceman had finally left his controversial past behind him and had begun to mature both as a player and a person. This hope, coupled with his decent play that year, prompted the Rangers to keep the blue liner around once his entry-level contract expired at the end of the season, as on September 20th, 2019, New York signed DeAngelo to a 1-year deal worth $925,000. Though he hadn't received the hefty payday he might have been hoping for, the former first-round pick would earn himself a pretty sizable raise over the coming year. The recent 2019-20 NHL season would see DeAngelo suit up for the Rangers once more and look to kick his game up a notch during his second full year on the roster. Luckily for both the player and the organisation, he certainly wouldn't disappoint. Thanks to his increased ice time and the various offensive weapons playing around him, the blue liner would produce the best season of his entire pro career by far, as he potted 15 goals and 53 points in just 68 regular season games before the season was cut short due to the global pandemic. Not only that, DeAngelo had also registered 30 less penalty minutes despite playing 7 more games than the year prior, and had once again gone the entire season without being suspended or reprimanded by his team or the league, so he had once again showed vast improvement in his overall game and was causing far less problems off the ice too. This standout year prompted New York to offer DeAngelo a sizable increase in his salary once the season had come to an end, as on October 15, 2020, the Rangers signed DeAngelo to a 2-year, $9.6 million deal worth an average annual value of $4.8 million a season. So thanks to a career year, Tony DeAngelo had not only cemented his place in the best league in the world, he'd also secured himself the first multi-million-dollar deal of his career. Though he had finally lived up to his potential and achieved his career-long aspirations, everything was about to come crashing down around him. As the 2021 NHL season finally got underway, DeAngelo took to the ice with the Rangers yet again and looked to continue putting points on the board as he entered the prime of his career. Unfortunately though, the 25-year-old would find himself in some pretty hot water from the moment the puck was dropped. During the Rangers season opener against the New York Islanders on January 14th, DeAngelo was called for a holding penalty early in the third period and decided to air his frustrations with the officials. The defenceman must have taken his comments a little too far though, as his reaction earned him a second minor penalty, this time for unsportsmanlike conduct. Not only would he sit in the penalty box for 4 minutes instead of 2, DeAngelo would also find himself in the press box for the next 2 games of the regular season, as Rangers head coach David Quinn decided to scratch DeAngelo after his actions and remind him that if he wanted to stay in the lineup, he should stop taking stupid penalties. DeAngelo's unnecessary behaviour during opening night also prompted a conversation with Rangers general manager Jeff Gorton, who told the blue liner that he was on his last warning and that if there was one more incident involving him, the Rangers would place him on waivers and move on without him. Though this ultimatum might seem a little overkill on the surface, DeAngelo's actions both on and off the ice had been rubbing the Rangers the wrong way for quite some time. Though he hadn't been suspended or publicly reprimanded in any way since moving to New York back in 2017, DeAngelo's use of social media had caused some problems for the organisation. Whether it was his vocal support of the now previous president, his reactions to recent political events, or his opinions on the current global pandemic, DeAngelo's unapologetic posting on Twitter meant that he wasn't the most liked player amongst the fanbase. As you can imagine, the Rangers weren't too happy to see one of their players going out of their way to deliberately antagonise large portions of their supporters, as it was giving both their team and their overall brand a negative reputation. The Rangers became so irritated with his inflammatory posts that they asked him to tone down his use of the site multiple times, but by that point, DeAngelo had already bounced on and off the platform several times before taking his thoughts elsewhere for good due to recent political events. However, if you thought his social media presence was bad enough, things were about to get a whole lot worse on the ice too. On January 30th, 2021, the New York Rangers hosted the Pittsburgh Penguins at Madison Square Garden for their 8th game of the regular season. Though the Rangers would take a 4-3 lead late in the second period, the game would be tied at the end of regulation and overtime would be necessary to decide the victor. 10 seconds before the game-winning goal was scored though, DeAngelo, who was clearly exhausted having been out on the ice for quite some time, and Rangers netminder Alexander Georgiev had some form of miscommunication behind the net, which led to a mix-up between them and the puck being turned over to the opponents. This mistake led to Penguins captain Sidney Crosby stealing the puck away from both of them and eventually burying the game winner to give Pittsburgh the victory. Now, most of you watching this have probably heard some kind of story of what happened next, and I know that there are a number of rumours surrounding who was involved, so I'm going to try and give you the most accurate account of the events based on the research I've conducted. As the Rangers left the ice and returned to their dressing room, a disappointed Georgiev sat in his stall contemplating on his performance when DeAngelo walked by and made a sarcastic crack at the goalie. Whatever DeAngelo said must have really upset Georgiev, as the netminder stood up and clocked DeAngelo with a punch to the face. The two teammates then went after each other, while other members of the roster attempted to break them up. According to a number of reports, it is believed that either long-time Rangers forward Chris Kreider or rookie defenseman K'Andre Miller were the first players to try and break up the fight. Once tempers had cooled down and the players left the arena, DeAngelo got a call later that evening, either from the team or his agent, telling him that this incident was the final straw. The Rangers had had enough of his behaviour and would be placing him on waivers the next day. Now I know what some of you are thinking. So what if he had a little bust up with his teammate? Fights happen in practice all the time. And besides, the guy scored 50 points in 60 games last year. You can't just give him up for nothing, you know. While his prior season with the Rangers was indeed an impressive one, DeAngelo's start to the current year was anything but. With a single assist and a -6 rating in his first 6 games of the season, DeAngelo had not only continued to struggle defensively, his offensive side of the game was now almost non-existent too. These numbers, coupled with the off-ice incident with Georgiev, was all the Rangers needed to justify putting him on waivers, where he would either be reassigned to their taxi squad or claimed by another team and become their problem instead. Though the other 30 NHL teams all had the chance to claim DeAngelo for nothing in return, no organisation, quite understandably, decided to bite on the controversial blue liner, so the defenceman cleared waivers and was reassigned to the Rangers taxi squad on February 1st. Amidst this move, several serious accusations began to surface surrounding DeAngelo's relationship with his teammates. Fan blog Blue Shirt Banter claimed that there had supposedly been some friction between DeAngelo and Rangers rookie K'Andre Miller. In fact, the article suggested that DeAngelo may have kept Miller's first goal puck away from him after Miller scored his first NHL goal against the Buffalo Sabres on January 26th. This rumour was further fueled by the fact that none of the Rangers' social media pages had posted an image of Miller holding his first goal puck, which is something of a tradition in the NHL, and it was done for fellow teammate and former first overall draft pick Alexei Lafreniere several days later. These accusations, coupled with the seriousness of the incident involving Georgiev, prompted Rangers president John Davidson and general manager Jeff Gorton to hold a press conference before New York's game against Pittsburgh on February 1st. During this meeting, Davidson emphasised that there had been no animosity between DeAngelo or Miller, and that the former had supposedly helped the latter get acclimated to the league as they were defensive partners earlier in the season. When asked about Miller's first goal puck, Davidson made it clear that DeAngelo hadn't taken it or refused to hand it over. The puck was currently in the possession of the team's training staff, who were building it into a plaque, which they would then give to Miller to commemorate his achievement. Davidson also mentioned how disappointed he was to hear that Miller's name had been brought up with regards to DeAngelo being waived, as the youngster had absolutely nothing to do with the situation whatsoever. When asked about the defenceman's future with the team, Jeff Gorton stated that Tony DeAngelo had played his last game as a New York Ranger, and that the organisation were in the process of trying to trade him elsewhere in the league. Gorton also stated that DeAngelo was becoming a distraction for the team, and said that the blue liner didn't react well to being benched earlier in the season, which led to Gorton giving him the ultimatum. Finally, Davidson also wanted to mention that DeAngelo's social media presence had nothing to do with him being waived, although I doubt it helped his case all that much, you know. So less than a calendar year after producing a career season, and just a few months after signing the biggest, most expensive contract of his pro career, Tony DeAngelo has seen his place on an NHL roster slip through his fingers. Now, if you want my opinion on this whole situation, I would be very surprised to see Tony DeAngelo suit up in another NHL game for the rest of his career. Of course, it's not outside the realm of possibility for another NHL team to take a chance on him, given the value that he brings offensively, but his behavioural issues, both in the past and more recently, should give any organisation cause to think long and hard about whether he's actually worth the trouble. As it stands right now at the time of this recording, Tony DeAngelo has struggled to score points this year, has difficulty defending even at the best of times, and is problematic in the locker room too. What team is going to want to add that to their roster? And besides, does DeAngelo even deserve another chance at this point? I mean, the guy was suspended multiple times in juniors for his bad behaviour, he bounced between 3 different teams in 3 seasons due to his poor attitude, and he has recently been the catalyst towards a physical altercation with his teammates. Why should he get another chance over someone else? Sure, he can put points on the board when he's on a hot streak, but there are plenty of other talented, less problematic players that would kill for the opportunity that DeAngelo has been given, so why not give someone else a chance to take his place and prove that they belong in the NHL instead? Though his 106 points in 206 NHL games make him a very appealing asset on paper, DeAngelo is likely to cause more of a headache than his point production is actually worth. After all, no team will want to eat humble pie after DeAngelo causes yet another incident after this, and they certainly won't enjoy the fan backlash once their supporters discover that their favourite team has decided to acquire one of the most problematic players in the league today. For every handful of points that he seems to score, DeAngelo also throws in a bad penalty, a suspension, or a serious off-ice incident to go with it. And at 25 years old, there's no more excuses for his behaviour. DeAngelo has had multiple chances to grow up, mature, and become a better player and all-round person, but he has chosen not to, so he should have to accept whatever consequences come from this decision, whether he's happy with them or not. So where do things go from here? Well, considering DeAngelo is no longer allowed anywhere near the Rangers' NHL or AHL teams, let alone suit up in a game for either of them, the organisation now has two options. Either they trade him elsewhere, or they buy out the remainder of his contract. Trading DeAngelo would give the Rangers at least something of value in return, but they would be negotiating from a real position of weakness, given his recent behaviour and lengthy track record. Trading him would also mean that the other team in the deal could get rid of an expensive, underperforming contract of their own too, so while several players or draft picks might be exchanged, financially there might not be that much of a difference, which in the cash-strapped days of the current global pandemic is a pretty important factor to consider, you know. Some of you might be wondering why the Rangers would still try to trade DeAngelo if no team picked him up on waivers. Well, that is because when a player is claimed on waivers, the claiming team has to take on the player's entire yearly cap hit, whereas with a trade, New York can retain up to half of DeAngelo's yearly salary. So as ridiculous as it sounds, any team interested in acquiring DeAngelo would likely be better off giving up an asset than pick him up off waivers for nothing in return. The NHL's a weird business, alright? On the flip side though, buying out DeAngelo's contract would mean that he would no longer be a member of the organisation, but the Rangers would still have to pay him against their salary cap for several years after the fact while he either plays for another NHL team or moves overseas. That said, Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman pointed out that DeAngelo could be bought out for just 1/3 of his contract's value instead of the regular 2/3 due to his age, meaning a buyout would cost the Rangers a little over $883,000 a year for the next 2 seasons. A pretty manageable number compared to his $4.8 million cap hit. However, the team would be unable to buy him out of his deal before the current season is over, so his entire cap hit would still count towards the Rangers' books for the rest of this year, and they would essentially be paying DeAngelo to stay away from the team. Given that this whole situation went down a little over a week ago, whether DeAngelo's tenure in New York ends in a trade or a buyout remains to be seen. If a team does decide to trade for him though, their front office is going to have a lot of explaining to do. You know, it's probably a good thing that there aren't any fans in attendance this year. DeAngelo might have got himself suspended for his reaction to hearing all the boos from Rangers fans. So, will DeAngelo get another chance in the NHL, or will his recent actions and lengthy track record force him to seek out another opportunity elsewhere in the hockey world? I guess we'll have to wait and see. And that was the story of Tony DeAngelo's journey from career year to waivers. What do you guys think about DeAngelo's career up until this point? Do you think he will get another chance to finally mature and live up to his potential, or do you think his time in the NHL is all but over? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Carl Fairbank, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Jordan Whitehead, Tom from Finland, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.